you've basically like left your full-time job and you're entrepreneur or you're a businessman, right? And you've also worked on a full-time job like corporate America. Like you cannot get more corporate America than the job that you had. Like
Right.
what are some like pros and cons that you feel like people should know before like they actually quit their full-time job and like just go head on with their business? Like what would you, if somebody's just like starting off on that journey, what would you recommend that they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the first things is my advice is always please don't quit your job, right? Keep your job and work on what you want to work on part time because I don't know, like 95% or so of businesses can be worked on part time. So do that and then make a game plan, right? Like what revenue do you need to get to in order to be able to quit your job if that is something you want to do to be an entrepreneur full time? I think we hear all of these stories about these people that take like these massive leaps of faith, right? I think the most prominent one being Elon Musk, where he sold PayPal for like 200 million and then put 100 into Tesla or 100 into SpaceX and didn't
Mhm.
have money for rent. Again, amazing story, incredible grit, but don't do that, right? Because there's a reason these are noteworthy stories because they're the exception, not the rule, right? So make a game plan, work after hours, work before hours, do what you need to do and figure out what that number is that gets you to a point where you can quit your job and say, I'm going to take this full time, right? So make a game plan. And then I think the other thing is like find your why, right? Because, and I'm happy to go into mine as well, but you need to have a why you want to do this, right? Because this journey gets really tough. It gets really lonely. And sometimes it's not worth it for most people. I think it's very glorified, but it's not that glorious on the day to day, right? So when times get tough and you have your why, it's going to push you through it, right? And one of my favorite quotes is entrepreneurs are willing to work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40 hours a week, right? Because
Mhm.
for a lot of entrepreneurs there's this chip on your shoulder, right? You want to prove something to the world, you want to prove something to someone, you want to prove something to yourself, you want to build something, right? If you don't have this burning desire, you can still be an entrepreneur. I actually really recommend everyone have a side hustle, a part-time thing that they do because it keeps your brain fresh and it keeps you excited, and it's nice to have some level of diversified income, right? But I think a lot of people get it twisted what it feels like or what that journey is like to quit your job to do something full time as an entrepreneur. Which it's not, right? But it just comes down to, again, make a plan, find your why. And one of the quotes that I'm going to share that I've also been really, I enjoy, and I think it kind of really embodies this entire experience is, people romanticize their plans but dread the execution. The magic you're
Yeah.
looking for is in the work you're avoiding, right? So
Right.
I always tell some of my friends this, and people that'll like ask, I say like, when you start a business, it's a lot of fun, right? We've all been there, right? Like you register a domain, you build out your WordPress website, or if you're like me, HTML, CSS, you build out that website. It's so much fun, right? It's this novelty. You're excited. But then the fun ends, right? And then the work starts, right? And the work of being an entrepreneur is not what you see online. It's not Lambos and penthouses, right? It's just work. Like any other job, it's work. And if you come in with the mindset that that's going to be your life, you're in
Mhm.
for a pretty nasty surprise, right? And the best analogy here that I always think about is a sports analogy, right? Because any professional athlete, right? Like you look at like a professional basketball player, boxer, marathon runner, whatever it is, right? And you see what the audience sees, right? Which is exciting. It's LeBron James scoring 50 points. It's Elliot Kipchoge breaking the 2 hour marathon. And all of that's cool. But most professional athletes spend 1% or less of their time in front of an audience. If you look at a professional boxer, like, and you're like, hey, I want to be the guy in the ring that's like boxing and knocking people out with the audience cheering for me, I want that to be my life. But the truth is, even for a professional boxer, that's not their life. Their life is a diet, a proper diet that consists of high protein, high carb, it's properly sleeping, and it's just a shit ton of running on a treadmill, conditioning, and hitting a bag again and again till it becomes mind numbing. LeBron James, Steph Curry, all they do all day is they take shots, right? You empty gyms, taking that same shot again and again, like hundreds of thousands of times. That's what it's like to be a professional athlete, right? That's the true work.
Mhm.
And so I think drawing that analogy again back to entrepreneurship, the true work is the conditioning, it's the diet, it's the sleeping, right? If you were a professional athlete, it's the same thing. It's the spreadsheets, it's the cold sales calls, it's it's being a janitor basically for your company. It's cleaning shit up, it's putting out fires. that's really all that it is. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a lot of fun. It's incredibly gratifying. And 10 out of 10 times I would do this again over what I did at my corporate job. And I have zero regrets over my decision. I love it every single day, but it's not what people think it is. And, but it is a lot of fun, not to be a Debbie Downer. It's not my point. My point is to just be realistic about what this journey looks like. Cause I do think, like social media, TikTok, all these places. And before that, it was magazines and newspapers. So this isn't, something that's just a contemporary problem. It's always existed. But I think it glorifies that journey when really the only thing glorified is the destination, right? It's when you sell that company or you ring the New York bell in the New York Stock Exchange because your company IPO'd. Yeah, those are glorified experiences. Everything else is just work. But hopefully, again, your why is strong and your game plan is strong and what you're doing you care about. And so it makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on a great point because it's like anything that I've ever worked at as well. Like I'm obviously not an entrepreneur by myself. I just work like a 9 to 5 job, but it's always like, bro, it becomes grueling and like it's very easy to like romanticize about like building your own business and whatnot. And then like
Mm-hmm.
if me personally, when it comes to the actual work, I'm just like, bro, I don't want to do this anymore. So
Yeah.
and obviously it comes, I think it's kind of starting to get magnified as well, I guess, because of
Mm-hmm.
like podcasts like this as well, like called Entrepreneurs Galore, where we're just basically glorifying people who are actually living the life that everybody kind of wants to live, but in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like the nice cars and the freedom and whatnot. But like the reality is that you're kind of being lied to on social media as well. Like everybody's just posting their highlight reels, right? Like nobody's showing all the different like 80-hour work weeks that they're actually working, or nobody's showing like LeBron James actually putting up shots, right? Like if they showed like LeBron James on like a live stream for 24 hours in a day, like people will be like, yeah, there's no way that I could ever do this. And that's probably why he's
100%.
either he's top two of all time, like, and that's not even
Mm-hmm.
debatable, but that's
Right.
literally why. Sure, is it a lot of it is like god-given talent and height and all these things, but it's also he made the most out of it. Like like I remember people who were just tall, but like it's the same joke that we make, right, all the time with like tall people. It's like, why the hell did you like are you not on a basketball court? Well,
Yeah.
it's like you were kind of given a god given ability, and you didn't put in the hard work that you needed to. You didn't
Mm-hmm.
hone in on your craft as well. So I think entrepreneurship as well, like regardless of whatever you're doing in terms of like being either a plumber or a software engineer, or being in rapid diligence or being a virtual assistant, whatever it is, I think you need to hone in on the craft every single day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I love that live stream, kind of example where if someone was to see the work that goes into it, they'd be like, yeah, screw this. I don't want to be a professional athlete. And I think that's true of entrepreneurship too, right? It's like I think if people actually saw what goes behind closed what happens behind closed doors, they would reconsider their whole like ideology of entrepreneurship. But not to leave it on a too pessimistic of a note, and it's not really, I don't think I was being pessimistic. I think the goal is just to be more realistic, because it's almost like the pendulum needs to swing in the other direction, right? Because every other person out there is talking about, oh, like Lambos and penthouses, and like, oh, do whatever you want, blah blah blah. But I think we need to be realistic. I think we owe it to people to be realistic, right? Because
Yes.
otherwise you lead people on into a journey that they don't even know that they're getting into. But I will say one of the greatest things is like having control over your own life, right? And if you're kind of like that type of person, it's like, okay, I want control over as many aspects of my life as possible, like I am. Entrepreneurship's amazing, right? Because I mean, there are days where I don't work, right? And you can't do that in a corporate job. I don't feel like working, so I don't work, right? And I have a small team in place that takes care of things. I think I've shared this with you personally, but it's I hate doing sales calls. I love talking to our clients and stuff, but I hate the aspect of sales calls, because that means I have to be in front of a phone at a certain time, and that means that I need to follow up with people. I just don't like that aspect. It doesn't give me the freedom I need. So I hired a salesperson that now takes care of that, which has now significantly improved my quality of life, right? Because now I don't have to worry about that. You can't do that for a job, right? You can't say, oh, I don't like this part of my job, I'm going to hire someone to do it. That's not how
Right.
it works. You do your job. And so, there are those positive aspects. I mean, there are weeks where I don't work and I don't need to work because I'm abroad, I'm doing something, and I have a team that takes care of it. But there are weeks that I'm also like, man, I'm really not feeling it. We all have our bad days, right? And I'm like, dude,
Yes.
the last thing I want to do is get on a call with the client, and the last thing I want to do is, and there have been times I've been sick, and especially early on when your business is small, you don't have a team. Um, I when times where I was sick, I think there are both sides, and so it's definitely not all glorified, but I think when you do it correctly, it's a beautiful, wonderful thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's it's just the nature of this life and this world in general, right? Like everything is going to have their pros and cons, right? Like it's like, okay, like you can make $100,000 a year by working in corporate America and you could just be fine, but it's like, okay, well, you have to, either commute every single day, 5 days a
Mhm.
week, and then you just have the weekends to yourself. For entrepreneur, I personally think that the majority of the times, like, entrepreneurs are more than likely to work weekends than like regular other people,
Mhm.
just working jobs. So I think a lot of people forget that aspect of, like, hey, if you're trying to build something from the ground up, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time, and you don't see results right away at all.
Yeah.
Like, you do not get a paycheck at the end of the 2 weeks or the end of the month. Like, you probably some most of the times, like, these entrepreneurs with, like, that sell these software companies or whatever the case might be, whatever they sell, they don't see that return until like 3 years later.